Evening all. Now this is a quick video just explaining the changes I have done to my profile to Kerbalism that I will be using for season 3 of my YouTube Let's Play. I have done a lot of change with it. As with version 2, I changed a lot of the way Kerbals eat and breathe and other bits and pieces, and I've done that pretty much again with this one with 1.6. So let me explain exactly what I've done and my reasoning behind it. So firstly, if I grab a pressurized tank here, I have changed Kerbalism over from using the standard resources of oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, ammonia and carbon dioxide, using the liquid versions of them. My reasoning for that is because Kerbalism uses the community resource pack made by Roverdude, which is a fantastic mod. It basically puts all your resources like oxygen and things like that into a single place, and every mod can reference it. That just makes things easier for every mod, because then you know oxygen is going to be the same no matter where you go. The drawback to it is that if you take water, which is made of 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, you take the density of water, the density of hydrogen and density of oxygen as the community resource pack says, add 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen together, you do not get the density of water. You get way lower than that, so it doesn't really make sense. But if you take the liquid versions of oxygen and hydrogen, it does kind of add up. It's not exact, but it is close. So that's why I've switched Kerbalism over to using the liquid versions of them. It does mean that because they are much more dense, I've had to change things. You'll see here that some of these numbers are extremely low compared to what Kerbalism would be as normal, but don't worry about that, because it all does add up. You see here hydrogen is quite high because it's not very dense. I have added water to the external tanks as well, because it just made sense in my head. They store liquids, so that makes sense. If I get rid of that for the moment, you'll see here that a single pod has enough of, it's got 5 days of food. It says 4 days, 5 hours, but it is 5 days of food, 5 days of water, 7 days of oxygen. That's because a Kerbal can last 3 days without eating and 1 day without drinking, I think, but they can only last like 30 minutes without breathing, if that, I think. So yeah, it's got more oxygen there, and nitrogen would also be 7 days for pressurized if it had a pressurized config in it. What's that called? Sorry, pressure control in it. That's a change I've made. Every pod now has 1 slot per Kerbal. So if I get rid of that and I put in, say, the Mach 1-3 command pod, which has got some wonderful new textures, by the way. Squad have done a fantastic job on that. This one has 3 slots because it has 3 Kerbals in it. It can store 3 Kerbals. So that just made sense in my head. That means that the most one that it can have is the Mark 3 cockpit, which has 4 slots there, and the smallest ones are obviously the 1 slot. We've got a couple of 2 slots and bits and pieces. The cupola, I think, is just a 1 slot pod. Yep. So yeah, that made sense in my head, so that's what I went for. It does mean you're going to have to do a little bit of jiggery pokery with long distance craft, simply because there is a new feature that N70 has added called humidity control. When Kerbals breathe, obviously they breathe out moisture. Unless you take that moisture out of the atmosphere, it's going to condense up on things and electric shock your Kerbals to death. So there's something there. I have changed that slightly from being 1 day to 5 days. By default, after a single day without humidity control, a Kerbal can electrocute himself and die. Whereas in my profile, it does take 5 days for that to happen. So yeah, that's just something to make a note of. It does mean that you can get to the moon and back with a standard pod, but you can't really stay and do anything. Kind of tight. That just sort of made life, I think, a bit easier, just how it works there. So what am I doing here? Water storage radial tanks. The supply containers, they have been changed to store food and water. I think by default. Oh, let me grab the standard pod now. If I get rid of everything off here, there for the electricity, the standard supply container has enough food for 53 days. Food and water for 53 days. I have changed these up slightly so that when you configure them now, the food and water are now based off of, I think it doubles the amount of food or water if you just put it as a single container. So that way if you put 2 in, and you have 1 set to food and 1 set to water, you'll get 107 days for each. I'll be honest with you, I didn't test with the N70's version, but with the Shotgun Ninjas version on Series 2, if you actually took 2 containers separately, you would gain more resources than if you just took 1 container with 2 inside it. That makes sense. If you had a container set up for food and water, you would gain X amount of food and water. But if you took individually ones, one with food and one with water, you would have more resources overall than having 2 containers of split sets. So it was more profitable to take 2 separate containers of each. Now I balanced it so that it just is the same. It's the same either way. The greenhouses are something that I've also had to change because N70 changed it so that you need 2 greenhouses per Kerbal to make enough food for 200 days. And I didn't really like that change. I'll be honest with you, that's personal preference. I didn't like that. I thought it should be 1 greenhouse per Kerbal. So that's what I've done now. A greenhouse, bit of that there. A greenhouse now contains enough resources to last for 200 days on its own, and in 200 days can produce 210 days worth of food, I think it is, for a Kerbal. So providing you have that and you have, I think it's the big supply container, was it the... Nope, I think the big supply container gives you 300 days of food. You slap that on there, and providing you've got enough electricity for it, it will give you not electricity, enough ammonia, carbon dioxide, and stuff like that. It will give you enough food to last 1 Kerbal forever, essentially. So yeah, that was a balance that I made because that just sort of adds up in my head, 1 to 1. Makes sense. Of course, the chemical plants are something that I've changed as well, and the ISRUs. Here, you'll see there's other bits and pieces here because I have extra planetary launch pads installed. I've never used that mod. At least I haven't used it in years, so I'm not entirely sure how it works. That would be fun. But anyway, the ISRUs for Kerbalism. There are obviously the water electrolysis has been split into O2 and H. Not split. There are 2 versions of it. The O2 one will dump hydrogen and continue to produce oxygen, and the H2 one will dump oxygen and continue to produce hydrogen. That's important for when your tanks fill up, because you may want to carry on producing hydrogen after your oxygen tanks are filled up, otherwise you won't get any fuel. So yeah, that kind of just makes sense to have that split up there. Obviously if we go down to this one and switch it over to the Saboteur and Locks process, that's a new one. I have obviously changed all this system up here so that provided it has enough resources, it can convert approximately 1 ton worth of water into about 650 kilograms of fuel and oxidizer, I think it was. I haven't got the numbers up here in front of me, but yeah, and it does that per day, per Kerbal day, I think it was. Hold on, I'm trying to see here. Yeah, so it can do 650 kilograms of liquid fuel and 790 kilograms of oxidizer per Kerbal day, using 360 kilograms of carbon dioxide. That basically means that I think one of these Rocamax tanks, yeah, it fills it to about 90%, about there, in a Kerbal day, providing it can get enough resources of water, which would be think about that. Have a look here. 963 kilograms, so yeah, slightly more than a standard tank. You'd have to set that to water, and about there. It can convert that much water into that much fuel every day. Of course, mining that much water every day is quite a difficult task. You need lots of radiators and bits and pieces, and this is all assuming it's just on the default setup. I think engineers can make it faster, which is obviously a good thing, but it will require you to have quite substantial mining to work. The conversion process is not bad, but the mining does take a little bit of time. I think that's it. Oh, the other one, liquid fuel, that was the one here. I made a decision, basically, that oxidizer is liquid oxygen, which is what SpaceX's BFR is going to use. So it uses methane for liquid fuel and liquid oxygen for oxidizer. So rather than having the anthraquinone process, which produces liquid oxidizer, I've got one here that basically just takes oxygen and it takes, I think, 3 oxygen and compresses it down to make oxidizer. So that makes life easier. The reason behind that is because the default version uses hydrogen in everything, and hydrogen obviously is quite difficult to get because it's not the most abundant thing. Well, it is the most abundant thing in water because it's pure hydrogen, but it's a lot less dense, so you don't get as much of it as you do with oxygen. This way, this mining rig, if it had miners on it, would be able to just constantly run and be happy, and it's a little change that just makes life easier. In my head, just seems to work that sort of way. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Kerbalism, I think. Just having a quick read here of my change notes. Obviously, in my profile, at the very top of the profile, it has got a list of everything I've changed, so you can see what I've done there, and my not really reasoning for doing it, but what I've done and how it all works there. So yeah, hopefully this will make sense to people. It is quite a big divergence from Kerbalism at its default state, but well, I mean, my main reasoning for doing it is simply I'd much rather, I like the complexity of the mod, but I want it to still be fun. I don't want to have to set a mining rig up and leave it for a month just to produce enough fuel to, well, I think on the default setup, to fill up the orange tank, which is no longer orange, they've disguised it. I think is that one, is that the jumbo one? Yeah, there it is, there's the old orange tank, they've disguised it down here. To fill up one of them, I think it took almost 6 months on the default Kerbalism setup. That's obviously running automatically, not with a engineer in there. And on my version, obviously, it would be, let's see here, it would do about that per day, providing it has enough water. Mining the water is going to be the slow part. So it would take 1, 2, 3 and a bit days to fill up one of those. That's with this setup. That's with these convertertrons running full whack. Yeah, it would take sort of 3 or 4 days to fill it up. See, I'm okay with that because I'd much rather stop off somewhere, fill up the fuel quickly, and then get on. But obviously, the mining of the water, that's the bit that slows you down. You'd even need a substantial drill setup because these don't really produce water extraction. 25 a second, providing you can get 100 abundance. So depending on where you are, the lower it goes. 25 seconds at abundance 10%. That's changed slightly. Yeah, I've not done extensive testing of this out. I did test it. I did check it obviously works. I had some drills running. I think on my test setup I did something daft like that. And put that on the moon, had it mining, and that was enough to keep it going. Pretty much. Well, actually no, it didn't run out of water, even with 6 drills. So, but then I didn't really scan where I was on the moon. Might have been in a bad place. I don't know. If you find a good place, this might be a really, really good setup. It might be a bit overpowered, but well, it's fun, and that's the idea. I like having fun, and that's why I've gone with this way. So yeah, those are my changes to Kerbalism. I'm pretty sure I remember documenting everything I changed for it. It might be the odd 1 or 2 thing I've done. Doesn't make any sense. Can't really remember. Obviously been playing about with it a fair bit, but yeah. So yeah, as I said, at the top of the profile, it's got all the details, all the information, and it's also got a link to my Google Doc, which has the spreadsheet of all the formulas and calculations I use. So you can have a look there and see my reasoning behind things and how things work. So yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, makes sense in my head. But yeah, so that's the changes, and if you like them, I hope you'll grab my profile and let me know what you think. Let me know if you find anything that's seriously broken in it, because there may be. I think someone mentioned very recently actually that my version 2 profile, which I'd been using for well over a year, did actually have a broken line of code in it, which wasn't working properly, which never affected me apparently, but it was in there. So do let me know if you see something that's wrong with it so I can fix it. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Have fun.